The quaint town of Maplewood, nestled amidst rolling hills and whispering willows, had always been the picture of tranquility. Its inhabitants, known for their warmth and neighborly spirit, believed their idyllic bubble would never burst. But on the crisp autumn evening of October 12, 2008, a chill settled over Maplewood, a chill that had nothing to do with the changing seasons. A shadow descended upon the town, casting a pall over its once vibrant heart. It began with a frantic 911 call, a garbled voice thick with terror, and ended with a discovery that shattered the peace, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a community forever scarred. The silence of the evening was ripped apart by the piercing wail of sirens. Red and blue lights reflected off the faces of anxious onlookers, their hushed whispers doing little to penetrate the growing sense of dread. At the end of the street, cordoned off by yellow tape, stood a modest two-story house, its windows dark and lifeless. Unbeknownst to the gathering crowd, a horror lay hidden within, a scene so gruesome it would etch itself onto the very soul of Maplewood. The first responders to arrive at the scene, hardened veterans of countless emergencies, were ill-prepared for the sight that awaited them. It wasn't the blood, though it was plentiful, nor the chilling silence that hung heavy in the air. It was the raw, primal fear that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the house, a palpable presence that sent shivers down their spines. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood, a grim indicator of the carnage that lay within. Stepping over the threshold, the lead officer, a seasoned detective named John Riley, felt a cold dread grip his heart. He had walked into countless crime scenes, but this one was different. This one whispered of something sinister, something that spoke of calculated cruelty and an unspeakable darkness. A single lamp illuminated the living room, casting long dancing shadows that played tricks on the eye. The furniture was overturned, cushions ripped open, as if a struggle had taken place. Papers and photographs were scattered across the floor, silent testaments to a life abruptly upended. And then there was the blood. It stained the carpet a macabre crimson, splattered across the walls like a grotesque work of art. In the center of it all lay the body. The victims, a young couple named Sarah and David Miller, were beloved members of the Maplewood community. Sarah, a kindergarten teacher known for her infectious laughter and boundless compassion, had touched the lives of countless children. Her husband, David, was a carpenter, his calloused hands crafting not just furniture but a life filled with love and laughter for his young wife. They had been married for only 2 years, their dreams cut tragically short by a senseless act of violence. Their bodies, bearing multiple stab wounds, lay intertwined on the living room floor, a testament to the brutal end they had met. The brutality of the crime, the sheer savagery inflicted upon the young couple, sent shockwaves through Maplewood. This was not a random act of violence, a burglary gone wrong. This was personal. This was an execution. The weight of the investigation fell upon the weary but capable shoulders of Detective John Riley. A man of few words and even fewer emotions, Riley was known for his methodical approach and unwavering dedication to justice. The double homicide of the Millers struck a chord within him, reawakening a sense of urgency he hadn't felt in years. His eyes, hardened by years of witnessing the worst of humanity, held a steely glint, a silent vow to bring the perpetrator to justice. He surveyed the scene, his gaze sweeping over every detail, committing it to memory. The overturned furniture, the blood splatter patterns, the eerie silence that hung heavy in the air, they were all pieces of a macabre puzzle he was determined to solve. The killer had taken something precious from Maplewood, and Detective Riley would dedicate every waking moment to making sure they paid for their sins. Section 5. A trail of breadcrumbs. The initial investigation was a whirlwind of activity. Forensics meticulously combed through the crime scene, searching for any shred of evidence that might lead them to the killer. Every fingerprint was dusted, every fiber analyzed, every drop of blood scrutinized under the harsh glare of the lab lights. The pressure was immense. The eyes of the community, hungry for answers, followed their every move. The investigation led them down a winding path of dead ends and false leads. Neighbors, friends, and even distant relatives were questioned, their lives turned inside out as the police desperately searched for a motive, a connection, anything that could help them understand why someone would want the Millers dead. Days turned into sleepless nights as Detective Riley and his team tirelessly pieced together the fragments of information. The killer, it seemed, had vanished into thin air, leaving behind very little trace of their presence. Section 6. The clock ticks. As days turned into weeks, the sense of urgency intensified. The media descended upon Maplewood like a swarm, their cameras and microphones capturing the growing fear and frustration of the community. The pressure to solve the case mounted with each passing hour, the weight of expectation threatening to crush Detective Riley and his team. The longer the killer remained at large, the more likely it became that they would strike again. The investigation became an all-consuming obsession for Detective Riley. He spent countless hours poring over witness statements, analyzing forensic reports, and revisiting the crime scene, each time hoping for a new revelation, a previously overlooked detail that might break the case wide open. Sleep became a luxury he could ill afford, his dreams haunted by the gruesome images of the crime scene. Section 7. False hope and dead ends. Every lead they pursued seemed to evaporate before their eyes, leading to more questions than answers. A potential witness claiming to have seen a suspicious figure near the Miller's house on the night of the murders turned out to be chasing a figment of their imagination. A partial fingerprint found at the scene matched no records in the system, leaving them grasping at straws. The investigation was mired in frustration and dead ends, the trail growing colder with each passing day. The killer, it seemed, was always one step ahead, their movements a ghost-like whisper in the wind. The weight of their failure pressed down on Detective Riley's shoulders, the faces of the victims forever etched in his mind, a constant reminder of the justice he had yet to deliver. Section 8. The walls close in. Just as hope began to dwindle, a breakthrough emerged from an unexpected source. A seemingly insignificant detail, a half-remembered conversation overheard at a local bar, led the investigators to a pawn shop on the outskirts of town. The pawnbroker, a man with a nervous tic and shifty eyes, reluctantly confirmed that he had recently purchased a gold watch, identified as belonging to David Miller, from a man matching the vague description provided by the witness. The net was closing in, the circle of suspicion tightening with each passing moment. The pawnbroker's description of the man, combined with the witness's account, provided a much clearer picture of the suspect. His name was Mark Jenkins, a drifter with a history of petty theft and violence who had been spotted in Maplewood around the time of the murders. Section 9. A moment of truth. A warrant was issued for Jenkins's arrest and the manhunt began. Police fanned out across the city, their eyes peeled for any sign of the fugitive. The tension in the air was palpable. Every shadow seemed to hold its breath, every rustle of leaves a potential sign of the fugitive's presence. Days turned into a blur of adrenaline and exhaustion as the search for Jenkins intensified. Then, just when their hopes began to dwindle, a break. A tip from an anonymous caller led them to a seedy motel on the outskirts of town. There, holed up in a dimly lit room, they found Mark Jenkins, surrounded by empty liquor bottles and a scattering of $100 bills. He didn't resist arrest, his eyes holding a chilling emptiness that sent shivers down the spines of the arresting officers. Section 10. Justice and its aftermath. The trial of Mark Jenkins was a media spectacle, the eyes of the nation fixed on the small courtroom in Maplewood. The evidence against him was overwhelming. The pawnbroker's testimony, the witness's identification, and most damning of all, a blood-stained knife found hidden in his motel room, which matched the DNA found at the crime scene. The jury's verdict was swift and decisive, guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. The sentence, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, offered little solace to the grieving community. The scars of that fateful October night ran deep, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most idyllic town. The conviction of Mark Jenkins brought an end to the nightmare, but it couldn't erase the pain, the sense of loss that had become woven into the fabric of Maplewood. Section 11. The lingering shadow. Life in Maplewood slowly began to return to a semblance of normalcy, but the memory of the murders continued to cast a long shadow. The laughter of children playing in the park seemed a little less carefree, the friendly greetings exchanged across fences a little more subdued. The events of that autumn had irrevocably changed the town, leaving an invisible scar on its once pristine facade. The miller's house remained empty, a silent testament to the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. It stood as a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most peaceful communities, a chilling reminder that evil can touch even the most innocent lives. The case of An Hour to Catch a Killer served as a stark reminder that even in the quietest corners of the world, darkness can lurk, and sometimes it only takes an hour for it to shatter lives forever.